Imagine stepping onto the mat, knowing that the man in front of you has never lost. For 13 consecutive years, no one in the world could defeat him. He didn't just win, he destroyed, humiliated, and made world champions look like first-day beginners. His name was Alexander Karelin, and Western scientists were convinced that someone had created him in a laboratory, because no normal human being could do what this man did. Karelin was born in Novosibirsk, Siberia. Both of his parents were 1.65 meters tall. He came into the world weighing 5.4 kilograms. By age 12, he was already taller than his father. In 1981, he joined a wrestling gym, Greco-Roman wrestling, and never looked back. Not even when he broke his leg. Not even when his mother burned his wrestling uniform to make him give it all up, because in his early 20s, he had developed something that no heavyweight in history had ever achieved. In lift, he would lift a grown man off the mat from behind and slam him head first into the ground. His rivals didn't just fear losing, they were afraid he would destroy them. Before the world knew his name, Alexander Karelin had to prove himself at home. At the 1988 Seoul Olympic Games, the heavyweight category immediately felt the Siberian power. The young colossus swept through the bracket with feline skill, destroying everything that moved on the mat. No match lasted to the end.
Young.
Then came the final, for the gold medal. Rangel Gerovsky, a four-time medalist in world championships and one of the most technically talented heavyweights Bulgaria had ever produced, was waiting for him. Karelin came out strong, too strong. Gerovsky, calm and calculating, waited for his moment. He provoked the Russian to come closer, before grabbing his elbow and throwing him with a quick arm throw that earned him 3 points. For a moment, it seemed the gold was slipping away, but Karelin regrouped and began hand-fighting aggressively, prompting the referee to send them to the ground. From the top position, he wrapped his waist tightly and applied a gut wrench, recovering a point. Then he tried his signature throw. And although the amplitude wasn't enough to get the maximum score, he won another point. The pressure was increasing. Karelin kept pressing, kept fighting, and finally tied the score. With 55 seconds left, Gerovsky was awarded the dominant position for his activity. He was losing the gold medal again. Then Karelin grabbed his opponent, throwing all 127 kilograms of him into the air and slamming him onto the mat. A 3-point takedown that completely turned the match around. He held the lead until the final whistle. Alexander Karelin had just become the Olympic champion. Champion of the heavyweight, Greco-Roman, the youngest in history. But this wasn't even his best moment, not even close. And he wasn't prepared for what was about to happen. At the 1989 World Championship in Martigny, Switzerland, Karelin jumped onto the international stage. On August 31, it became clear at the World Championship that Karelin was climbing into the history books. First, Craig, the heavyweight American established at the World Championship, with technical skill, elite level, and the kind of athletic ability that had dismantled lower-level opponents without breaking a sweat. Fight. On paper, it was a mismatch, but Pittman didn't trust what was on paper. Despite his considerable disadvantage in size and weight, the American came out with grit, moving well, defending himself intelligently, and forcing Karelin to earn every inch of the mat. For a moment, it seemed like he was really up to the task, but Karelin was patient. He controlled the pace, methodically tightening his grip, waiting for the moment when Pittman's defense would crack just enough. Then, he found the leverage he needed from the clinch, and that was the beginning of the end. To life. He lifted the American as if it were nothing, arched his back, and threw him. Pittman was completely lifted off the mat. 104 kilograms of elite American wrestler in the air, before crashing to the ground with a force that ended the match instantly. After the pin, it was all over. The crowd fell silent for a moment before erupting. They had just witnessed a living legend in action. Karelin was the new world champion, and the world was beginning to understand what that meant. After completing a flawless 4-year cycle without a single defeat, Alexander Karelin, 24 years old, arrived at the 1992 Barcelona Olympic Games as the undisputed and universally recognized favorite. By then, the Soviet Union had already disintegrated, so Karelin competed as part of the unified team, made up of athletes from the former Soviet republics who competed under the same flag in their last games together. And once again, Alexander was given the honor of carrying the flag. Russia. Witnessing the supremacy of the Siberian wrestler, Western journalists nicknamed him the Russian Bear. Some called him Alexander. The Great became an even bigger experiment for the Soviet president, as many believed scientists had created this monster in a lab. All the best heavyweights on the planet had spent 4 years preparing specifically for him, but not a single opponent was able to last even 3 minutes with him in the fight. Then came the final for the gold medal. Thomas Johansson was waiting for him, from Sweden, a former world champion, technically solid, experienced, and dangerous. But none of that mattered. The Russian Bear immediately applied a body lock, pushed Johansson onto the mat, and pinned the former world champion before he had time to process what was happening. No one put up much resistance. No one came near him. Alexander Karelin left as a champion with his second Olympic gold medal and a reputation that had far surpassed the boundaries of the sport. He wasn't just the best wrestler alive. He was starting to look like the best who had ever existed, with 2 Olympic golds and a world championship already to his name. And still, Alexander Karelin kept climbing. At the 1994 World Wrestling Championships in Tampere, Finland, the Russian Bear faced his most accomplished rival to date. Waiting for him on the other side of the mat in the super heavyweight final was Hector Millan from Cuba, an Olympic champion in his own right. 2 men at the absolute peak of their physical and technical abilities. For the first time in years, the wrestling world had reason to believe that the final would be close. From the very first second, Karelin immediately pressed forward, smothering the Cuban's attack before he could even catch his breath and setting the pace entirely on his own terms. Milian was not just any opponent. He defended himself intelligently, moved well, and refused to give in easily. Karelin operated on a completely different level. Every time the fight went to the ground, it became a nightmare for the Cuban. His grip, his leverage, and his unyielding strength on the mat were something that no heavyweight in the world had an answer for. Point after point, he dismantled the Olympic champion. With less than a minute to go, Karelin was leading 8-0. Karelin executed a series of powerful offensive moves to build an overwhelming 8-0 lead. Before the final whistle, the relentless pressure and the growing deficit finally forced Milian to withdraw due to it. Thank you. Karelin had just secured his 5th world championship title. During the 3 years after facing Milian, Karelin continued to defend his heavyweight crown with the same relentless intensity that had defined his entire career. He won every tournament he entered and made a mockery of the best the sport had to offer. He hadn't forgotten Atlanta, and when Matt Ghaffari showed up in the final of the 1998 World Championship seeking redemption, Karelin gave him his answer, eliminating the American in a couple of minutes. The Russian bear kept crushing everyone who crossed his path, and the best wrestlers on the planet couldn't score a single point against him for 6 consecutive years. With that endless winning streak, Karelin's popularity spread far beyond the world of wrestling. By 1999, Karelin was no longer just a champion. He was a living legend. That year, Karelin traveled to Japan to support some friends at an MMA event. Then, a local fighter boldly approached him and challenged him to a mixed rules match. He didn't know much about MMA, but he didn't say no. The name of the bold challenger was Akira Maeda. According to the agreed rules, strikes were limited to open palms only, and hitting on the ground was prohibited. Overnight, the clash between the two became the biggest event in the history of the promotion. As soon as the fight began, Maeda surprised the fighter with low kicks. For a brief moment, the stadium dared to believe. Karelin decided it was time to change the course of the fight. He performed a front headlock, threw the Japanese wrestler into the air, and introduced him to what the commentators would later call Siberian Airlines. From that moment on, the Russian bear began setting up the Karelin lift, which caused panic among the Japanese commentary team. Karelin calmly walked to his corner while the professional wrestler had to be escorted. Clearly didn't like the kicks, so he took Maeda back on a Siberian Airlines flight.
Is
After 10 minutes of total domination, Karelin secured a unanimous decision. Throughout the fight, the Russian bear didn't throw a single punch, and yet Maeda couldn't leave the ring without being escorted. The proceeds from the event amounted to approximately $1 million, and every cent was donated to the Russian Wrestling Federation. The year 2000, in the final, Rulon Gardner, an American from Afton, Wyoming, was waiting for him. A dairy farmer. A man without any significant international achievements to his name. No medals in world championships. Nothing to suggest that he belonged on the same stage as the greatest Greco-Roman wrestler who ever lived. The match that followed would become the most anticipated in the history of Olympic wrestling. Karelin immediately took the initiative, pressing forward and trying to get behind Gardner's back, looking for the position that had ended careers for more than a decade. But Gardner was immovable, physically, extraordinary, and somehow impossibly standing firm against the Russian bear. Then came the Karelin lift. He lifted almost 136 kilograms onto his back and pushed hard, but Gardner twisted, squirmed, and found a way to survive. Karelin rammed him with his hip, tried to take him down. Gardner held on. The lift didn't work. When the second period began, the score was still 0-0, and according to the new rules, the wrestlers took the over-under clinch. What happened next will be debated forever. In an intense struggle, both men broke the clinch. The referee studied the replay carefully and ruled that Karelin was the first to let go. 1 point for Gardner. The stadium fell silent for a moment. Undefeated for 13 years on the international stage, was losing. Finding himself in a situation he had never experienced in his entire career. Karelin attacked relentlessly, leaning on Gardner's neck, pressing forward, desperately searching for a way to turn the match around. The difference was less than 3 points, which triggered a 3-minute overtime. Gardner was granted the position on the mat, and the American made his decision. He was going to survive. The last seconds felt eternal. Gardner held on. Karelin pressed as the clock ran out. Karelin never stopped attacking. He got a dominant position and tried once more to force the outcome. But then, the bell rang. Rulon Gardner, the dairy farmer from Wyoming, had just defeated the greatest wrestler who ever lived, and Alexander Karelin never competed again. 13 years, 9 world championships, 3 Olympic gold medals, 1 Olympic silver, and only 2 defeats, one of them in the final of his entire career. The world of wrestling didn't just witness a defeat that night, it witnessed the end of an era. There has never been anyone like Alexander Karelin in the history of combat sports. Not even in wrestling, not anywhere else either. A man so superior physically and technically to his generation that the sport essentially organized itself around trying and failing to stop him. And when defeat finally came, it wasn't at the hands of a rival who had mastered his craft, but because of a single grip released at the wrong moment in the final match of his career. 13 years undefeated, ended by a single point.